You are listening to the Eastern Conference Wednesday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Each and every week, the Battle of Ontario teams get together and take a look at the hottest and coldest teams in the Eastern Conference, but we've reached the quarter mark of this NHL regular season, so we've got some awards to hand out, from MVP to the most disappointing player. And has Mike's cup pick changed? All that coming up on today's edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. It's your team every day.
Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen on this Wednesday, November 30th. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me over at Locked On Senators Monday through Friday, and my co-host, Mike DiStefano, over at Locked On Leafs. Mikey, you're covering the hottest team in the Eastern Conference right now.
Evidently, the Maple Leafs, they've won four straight games for the Buds here. Big, all on the road as well. And at a time when the team lost a bunch of quality players, they lost their top three defensemen, and they just kind of bought in defensively. You've got Mitch Marner on a 17 games after last night. Point streak, one shy of the franchise record. You've got Matthews with back-to-back games with goals at 5-on-5. You've got Nylander with 9 goals in his last 12. You're getting some rookies stepping up. You're getting some young guys. It's really been a full team effort. It's good vibes in Toronto right now.
And Mikey, we were talking 2-3 weeks ago, and it was literally the opposite. You were talking about how maybe Sheldon Keefe's seat was hotter than any other head coach in the National Hockey League. So go ahead.
I'll say this, I did clarify also that it was because of the team underperforming.
Correct.
And that being the only bullet that, Kyle Dubas had essentially to make. And it was either the team gets it going and they pick it up themselves to save the coach, or he might have to be the sacrificial lamb. Luckily, the team got it going because Sheldon Keefe's a good coach, man. The guy's done a really good job, and thankfully they were able to weather the storm and keep him intact and keep him kind of manning the ship here. He's done a good job.
Yeah, for more on the Toronto Maple Leafs, of course, you can listen to Mike and his co-host David Morris-Studi Monday through Friday, anywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube, where we'd also love if you'd subscribe to Locked On NHL. It goes a long way to helping the algorithm, as well as wherever you download your podcast. Leave a review on Apple. It also helps out the show mightily. All right, more from the last week, and then we're going to get into some awards as we've reached the quarter mark, the American Thanksgiving flagpole portion of the NHL regular season. But since we last spoke, not only are the Toronto Maple Leafs undefeated, 4-0, but there's a couple other win streaks in the Eastern Conference. The Islanders, sneaky Islanders team, has won 3 in a row, and the Montreal Canadiens 2-0 this week, all no losses either. All right, and we should, just for completeness sake, the New Jersey Devils win streak came to an end. Who beat them, Mike?
The Devils, that would be the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Right.
They were one shy of breaking the record, and the Maple Leafs went in there and said, I don't think so, and got it.
3? Was it 3 goals called back?
Yes, it was 3 goals called back. There was lots of things thrown out onto the ice and probably some profanities for the officiating. But, I mean, those were non-goals. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sure people and our good friend Trey Matthews probably would have something else to say. He probably disagrees with that. But at the end of the day, they were all upheld and called as no goals. So who am I to argue with the NHL and the guys over in Toronto, all right?
Oh, wait, the Worms in Toronto?
Oh, I hear. Some people are saying that the Worms in Toronto. That's what some people are saying. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, full disclosure, we are recording on Tuesday. It's a busy night in the National Hockey League, so we're not going to get too bogged down in the Thanksgiving standings, where we know a lot of teams that are in at Thanksgiving are in come playoffs. But I do want to get into the Stanley Cup picks that we made in preseason. Mike, has yours changed at all now that you've had 20 game sample size from every team in the league?
Probably. I think it has changed. I believe I would have said, because did we open it up? I can't remember if we opened it up to a full league-wide pick, or did we keep it on this show? Do we keep it to just Eastern Conference?
I think it was just Eastern Conference.
Okay, then I believe I would have said Tampa at the beginning of the year. That would have made the most sense. And
Yeah, I had the Rangers, and they're underperforming, losers of 3 straight.
Yeah.
Big home and home coming up with the Ottawa Senators. We just had John
Yeah.
Chick on from Locked On Rangers on our show, but that's a team that looks like they need a bit of jump. And now all of a sudden, we're hearing Gerard Gallant's name being thrown out by fans. Maybe nothing to it, but there is obviously. And I asked John Chick today. Sorry to get off topic, but the Rangers are a big story. I do want your cup pick. Now, what would that Rangers team be if they hit a home run on like one of the 4 high picks that they had? Lafreniere and Kakko are playing like middle 6 roles. Kravtsov has been a healthy scratch, 9th overall. And Elias Anderson, they had to trade for a bag of pucks. He was 7th overall. Like those are 4 top 10 rather picks who just haven't panned out, and still early on Lafreniere. But with the talent they have at the top of their lineup, they would be a dynasty.
They would be. And everyone was crowning them for that quick turnaround, and it really hasn't. I mean, they went to the conference final last year, so I mean, they still have been real solid. But to start this season, at least at the quarterway mark, they've definitely been one of the more disappointing teams. And I have a feeling, just a tease, that when we talk about disappointing players in the National Hockey League in the Eastern Conference through the quarter mark, somebody on that team will probably come up. That said, they are not my Stanley Cup pick. My Stanley Cup pick at this point, I probably got to go with the Boston Bruins, to be honest with you. Like, what we're seeing out of Boston is unreal, and they only seem to be getting better and better and better. Like, they've gone through so many injuries. They started the year off with Marchand injured, Grzelcyk was injured, McAvoy was injured. They've all come back, and they've just seamlessly transitioned and allowed this team to keep getting better and better. Ullmark and Swayman have spent some time injured. The two of those guys. Ullmark coming back, I believe, for tonight's matchup.
Ullmark is 13, and again, this is leading into tonight, but Ullmark is 13-1 on the season.
It's unbelievable. And that team is 12-0 at home. They can't beat them at TD Garden. You just can't beat them. So if they end up winning the conference and winning the division, which is very possible for them to do, if they're unbeatable at home, I mean, in a 7-game series, that's going to be tough to do. And like, that's just a squad. You look at that roster up and down, it got last dance type of vibes, and they got guys who know how to win a Stanley Cup over there. So right now, a quarter way in, I think the Boston Bruins are a team that might be primed to finish off that last dance type of maneuver and win themselves a cup. They've looked good.
You know what a super underrated move was last year? I know they paid a pretty penny to get him, but Hampus Lindholm is just one of those stabilizers on the back end where you can put him on any pair, and all of a sudden they're going to provide positive results in shot differential, in scoring chances for. It's unreal. Like, he even came in, and it takes a little while to acclimate wherever you are, but in 31 games in Boston, he's plus 30 with 23 points. That's unreal. And obviously, plus minus gets skewed, especially on teams as dominant top to bottom as the Boston Bruins. But he has been just such a positive light, averaging over 24 minutes a game and now settling in to a top 4 role. How about McAvoy too? 10 points in 8 games. But do they have an even better player? Maybe we'll get to that once the MVP talk comes around. I want to make this a little positivity sandwich. We get our cup picks right off the bat. We'll go through. I want to hit the middle. We'll go with the most disappointing player, and then we'll work our way back up. We'll give the rookies we'll make the rookies wait until near the end to talk about the best rookies. And then finishing off, we'll touch on our MVP in the Eastern Conference so far, 20 games in to the National Hockey League season. This is the time where trends start to develop. And today's edition of Locked On NHL is brought to you by BetOnline. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. Visit betonline.net. And I say trends because if you see a team like the Buffalo Sabres with 81 goals, and they're winning some, they're losing some, perfect time to go hit the over at BetOnline. There's streaks. Streaks are meant to be broken. So if you want to bet that the Leafs won't win the next game, well, go to betonline.net. I know it's bold, Mikey, but all streaks are made to be broken.
San Jose, Ross, they're playing the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, I mean, the Sens made the San Jose Sharks look like the Harlem Globetrotters last week, losing 5-1 in the Shark Tank.
The Sens suck,
But like, aren't the Leafs
fade the Sens on BetOnline?
Dude, the Leafs, I believe, have the worst record in the NHL over the last 5 years when they are minus 200 favorites in the game.
That's a correct stat. That is a correct stat, but that narrative is over. We're done. We're past that.
Oh,
Good
so
vibes.
streaks are meant to be broken.
No, that streak already broke when they went in and they beat the Detroit Red Wings, and they went and they beat a bunch of other clubs over the last couple. Good vibes, all right? We got good vibes in Toronto. Quit trying to bring it down.
Well, you know how I'll bring it down? I will let everyone know that you can get props at betonline.net. In 42 career games against the Toronto Maple Leafs, Erik Karlsson has 42 points, point per game player. So you can bet on him to get a point. You can still bet on the Leafs, though, if you're feeling confident. You know, you're going to have to lay some to get it at the odds, which you can go find at betonline.net. But that's what all the fun is, having a chat, having a laugh with the fellas over bad bets, bad beats, and stacking cash. You can find it all at betonline.net. It's where the game starts. All right, you're listening to Locked On NHL. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Mike DiStefano here on a Wednesday, November 30th edition. Can't believe it's just about December in the calendar. We're almost in 2023. But we've got a lot to get to from the year that was, and I want to go. Give me a surprise right off the bat. Who's your most surprising player in the Eastern Conference, for good or bad?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a couple that I think are.
Give me good, because we have a category here.
Yeah,
in the NHLs, we'll call it, with the most disappointing. So who surprised you for the better?
Yeah, I mean, like, is it too much of a homer pick to go with John Tavares? I mean, realistically, you as an outsider perspective, what did you expect of John Tavares coming off the season he had, coming into the new year, and then gets an oblique injury in training camp, and barely gets back for the start of the season, and then all of a sudden, the guy's been unbelievable. He's been terrific this year. I wasn't expecting that. That's been one of the more surprising players to me this season. He's sitting there 9th in the NHL in goals. Top 10 in point. I mean, like, the guy honestly is playing some of his best hockey that he's played in a while. Like, he's looking like the New York Islanders level of John Tavares, and he's doing it on the defensive side of things, on the offensive side of things. He's been one of the players that's really surprised me. Here's one for you that it's a bit of a cop-out pick, but how about Sidney Crosby leading the NHL in points at 5-on-5? Did you see this?
But that surprises you?
Just because he, at his age, I don't know, for some reason I when I was looking into the numbers and I was digging, I was like, oh, it kind of like my eyebrow went up. Sidney Crosby's leading the league in points at 5-on-5. It was kind of crazy to me.
No, I think that's fair. I just think that he's such an elite player. You just know that he's going to be one of those guys where even when he's 40 years old, he's still going to find a way to put up like 65, 70 points. Just so smart. He's just so smart at but I still respect. I mean, he's first place. You probably wouldn't have thought that going into the season. Sorry, is that first in the East or in the whole NHL?
In the entire NHL, Crosby is at 5-on-5 points. But the other one that I did want to hit on, that I did want to mention, we had talked about him previously, so I feel like, okay, let's bring it back into the fold. But it is Linus Ullmark. Like, the season that Linus Ullmark is having, pretty much at the top of every statistical goaltending category that's out there. Wins, save percentage, goals against. I mean, this guy honestly is having an unbelievable year for the Boston Bruins. 13-1 record, as you noted earlier. That has been a huge surprise, considering the season he had last year, adjusting to life in Boston. It did not go as well as anticipated when he signed that big ticket. I think it was like 5 years, $5 million, or 4 year, $5 million, something like that. But the second year of that deal has been a home run so far, and Ullmark has been a big surprise for the Boston Bruins, I think, and in the Eastern Conference of the NHL.
Yeah, I like that pick. I like that pick a lot. Goalie-friendly show over at Locked On Senators, so I appreciate you giving some love to Linus Ullmark. It's so funny to me because I feel like there's way more surprises in the Western Conference. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like Morgan Geekie
would be number one.
Yeah, and Morgan Geekie putting up ridiculous points to Seattle Kraken, who, I mean, you could just say the entire Kraken team would be one of the surprises in the entire National Hockey League, but we'll save that. Of course, you can tune in every Tuesday. Brett Holden and Jess Belmosto have your Western Conference covered, and this player was drafted into the Western Conference. He was in a big game trade where all of a sudden they lost, and I know we've talked about him a lot with the contract extension and how he started the year, but man, Tage Thompson deserves his flowers all season long. Like, I mean, we compared him to 66 last week, so maybe we should actually tone it down. but there's no player that maybe the surprise isn't the best term because he had such a good year last year. But the fact that he's duplicating that, if not improving on his campaign, is so impressive to me. So I'm going to go Tage Thompson 1, but you gave me 2. So I'm going to give you 2. We knew he was a good player again. So this is probably more like your Crosby one, another captain. But did we know Nico Hischier had the offensive capability that he's putting up this season? I don't know if we did.
No, he's a really good one. He's a guy too who's right up there when you look at points per 60. Nico Hischier is right in the mix there up at the top.
Dude, how about him being 58% in the dot? Like, he looks like a slender guy. It's just all tactical with him.
And everybody I talked to, I spoke with Ken Danico, a longtime Devils player. He's currently a broadcaster there. I remember when the Leafs were playing them last week, Lindy Ruff had said the same thing. Not only is the guy producing offensively, but he also is like a Selke candidate, a legitimate shutdown Selke candidate. Danico, I believe, called him, a little Bergeron light in a way.
I like that comparison. I mean, we hear it all the time whenever it's a two-way guy, but I actually like it for Nico Hischier. He's got the leader, dude, 20 of his 25 points at even strength too.
Yeah.
Or 19, sorry, because he's got a shorty.
I was gonna use him for surprising player, but I had him as breakout. I had him in the breakout category.
Yeah, fair.
So, but he certainly 100% deserves and belongs to be within this discussion.
I think his teammate might be the guy for breakout player. Another first overall.
Yeah, they both can be. I mean, absolutely. You can have both those guys there.
Yeah. So do you want to get into your breakout player? You can kind of build on Hischier if you want, and then if you want to give me a 1B situation, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just think this season that guy's having, both offensively and defensively, he's certainly somebody who is getting a lot of love and deservedly so. But I'll give you a couple other guys since we kind of already touched on them, just get some other guys some love. But in terms of a breakout star for me, how about Martin Nakash? What this guy's doing out in Carolina, 24 points in 22 games, over a point per game right now in the National Hockey League. I mean, this is somebody who has a career high of 41 a couple of years ago. That's a career high, right? He hasn't gotten past that, and he's already up to 24 through 22 games. The guy's been unbelievable so far this season. So he's somebody who I think definitely deserves, to be classified as a breakout star. And, they really needed somebody to come in and kind of solidify that top 6 in a way to give them that depth in behind Aho. And he's done just exactly that. So Carolina Hurricanes, they're in a real good spot with Martin Nakash in the mix, doing what Jesperi Kotkaniemi just simply couldn't do.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I actually, this leads me so perfectly into mine, because if you'd allow me to be a homer for a second, how many times did I hear Brady Tkachuk was only going to be a third line power forward? This guy's on pace for 92 points. He has 7 multi-point games this season. Jesperi Kotkaniemi has 5 multi-point games in his career, and he has 5 points on the season. If you don't remember the 2018 draft, 1 pick before.
What's his career high for Brady Tkachuk?
Brady Tkachuk hit 30 goals in game 82 last season.
Yes.
And
is this really a breakout? I mean, maybe.
I think so. 67 points. I mean, you could say maybe it's
last year might have been the breakout. This is just kind of building it.
If he goes, it's like so
Tage
30
Thompson, right? It's like Tage Thompson had his breakout year last year, and he's just building on it and getting better and better.
I think it's more so the overall game that he's playing as well. He's fighting a lot less. He's being asked to fight a lot less, even though I don't know if he's lost many. He stood up for Jake Sanderson in one of his games, the one in Anaheim, so dropped the mitts there. But he's just using himself so much better at 5-on-5. He always kind of looked like Bambi when he skated. He's improved that so much. Like he might be like, there's Gabriel Landeskog. I don't know how much longer the list is before you have Brady Tkachuk in the top power forwards in the National Hockey League. And I think people can forget it. Yeah, like Jamie Benn's having a bit of a resurgence in Dallas.
I'll give his brother a little notch on that as well.
Well, Matthew, I'd say he's more of a skill guy, though. Like Brady's like,
wow.
I mean, it's Matthew on a podcast recently that said Brady's the number 1 power forward in the NHL. I think that might have been a bit of brotherly love, but he's certainly in the mix. So that's why I've got him like 67 points, but still pretty bad defensive results last year. Now he's the number 1 Corsi guy. He almost became the first player in NHL history last season to have 300 shots on goal and 100 PIMs in the same season. He's just an animal out there. And I just got to give him his flowers for sure. Because, yeah, I see what you're saying, though. He's already hit 30 goals, 67 points. Is it a breakout? But if last year was his breakout and he went from like 45 on pace, right, 56 game season, he was probably on pace for 50. So if he goes 50 to 67, but then this year hits 85, I'd argue that that's the bigger gap. That's the breakout season where he's over a point per game player. I think even his biggest supporters at the draft, I don't know if they would have told you he was going to be an over point per game player at the NHL level. They would have talked about everything else he brings. So if he's becoming an even strength scorer and being able to score off the rush, two things that were kind of lacking in his game, you're looking at just a unicorn type player at 6'5", 230 pounds.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. I think he's a bit of a unicorn. Like, there's not many guys who play the way that he does. And for sure, he is certainly over exceeding what I ever expected him to be. I kind of clowned on the Ottawa Senators, to be honest with you, for keeping that pick and then giving up the pick the year after to the Colorado Avalanche, which turned into Bowen Byram. But I remember thinking to myself, that's dicey. I would not want to go into the following year knowing I don't have that selection. What if it turns into the number one? Luckily, it didn't. It turned into Bo Byram. But, I mean, even if it did turn into the number one, I mean, that ended up being, what year was that? What draft was that? No, it was Jack
Brady was 2018. That was when they were at the depth.
It was Hughes, though, right? So the following number one pick would have been Jack Hughes, is what I mean.
Correct.
So, maybe you would rather Jack Hughes. But anyways, they didn't get into that situation.
Yeah.
And I think they're certainly happy with the fact that they made that selection and didn't give it up and then grab someone at 4 like Bo Byram in the following year.
And it's off ice too, right? Like the face of the franchise, and they needed that with Karlsson on the way out. Like he puts them on the map as a franchise for sure, league wide, as he's got popularity in the States with the Kachuk name and everything as well. But stud. All right, moving on. So we've got our most surprising player, our breakout player. Let's hit a quick break and come back with our Rookie of the Year candidate and MVP. You're listening to the Locked On NHL podcast. Stay tuned for more after this. All right, you're Locked On NHL. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me Monday to Friday over at Locked On Senators alongside Mike DiStefano from Locked On Leafs. All right, before we get to those final two categories, we talk about breakout player, surprising player. How about who's disappointed you the most through 20 games?
I pumped up the tires of a couple of goaltenders earlier in the show just to take the wind out of the sails here. I mean, you take a look at a couple of these goalies, and you're not seeing great stuff out of two Russian goalies who are considered the top in the NHL, but both Igor Shesterkin and the guy who's been the number one for many, many years here, Andrei Vasilevsky, both definitely not having the seasons that you had expected them to have. Vasilevsky currently 19th in the NHL, the .905 save percentage, a .294 goals against. Shesterkin a .913 and a .258 in his last two games have been stinkers. I mean, that he's being given a nickname right now. Well, I guess I can't say it because it's a swear word, but like Igor Bleepkin, essentially, like Bleep Sturkin, whatever you want to say it. Like it's not good for those guys, and certainly I think that's where you're finding a little bit of issues and guys who are disappointing you this year. I think it's those two Russian tendies who have come to be what we have deemed and considered, the best goaltenders in the world, and they've been absolutely nothing of the kind this season.
Yeah, I like that. Well said too with Igor, and he's a big reason why the New York Rangers are faltering right now in the standings. Like it's tough to watch them kind of go the other way and not be where you'd expect them. A team who we always expect to be in the mix is the Washington Capitals. I feel like as an overall team, they've disappointed. So I could pick from a few guys. I don't want to take the low-hanging fruit, but when you're failing to produce, you got to look at the best players. And I feel bad doing it at 36 years old, but we've just come to expect them to be so much better. It's away from the puck, dude. Alex Ovechkin has been bad away from the puck, and I know that he's still scoring, and I mean, maybe not to the pace that we're used to, 11 goals in 23 games. That's usually 6 or 7 higher, but I just expect him to be the force to win games. You think that they're so weak outside of him with their injuries too, that it's really kind of beyond his control?
In a way, Like, I think you just he that team is so battered and bruised. I mean, they lost Tom Wilson for a long time. They still have
Connor Brown played 4 games.
Connor Brown got hurt. Like, they just have guys going down left, right, and center, and it's got to be tough to be there, right? It's probably, just hurting their just what's the word I'm looking for? Like the
mojo,
morale,
I guess.
Yeah, like the morale of that group is probably at very, very low, you would think, at this point in the year, just given the fact that they, like you said, are a perennial playoff team, and this year they're not there. But it just feels so dirty to include Ovechkin in.
I know, no, trust me. I didn't know who else had the right expectations on them. Like, Anthony Mantha just never lived up once he got traded. Like, he's just kind of, and I know Veranda's been dealing with some things and he's not in the lineup, but when he is, he's a much better player. So I look at kind of that trade as being a part of the downfall. Certainly not as bad as Erat for Philip Forsberg, but when you're looking at how Washington kind of fell apart, because I look at it and, like, Kemper's got a .917 save percentage. Like, that's league average, if not higher. And they're still faltering. And it just, I mean, if you're stopping pucks, then you got to put them in the net. So you look at the guy who's been able to do it for the last 18 years. And I guess you just have to understand Father Time, undefeated, and he's still producing, but it's not going to be at that MVP level that we've seen in years past.
It's funny. I'm just looking at the stats from last year to see what exactly, I guess, is going on. Like,
didn't he have 45, 50 goals last year?
Yeah, I think he had another 50 goal season last year. I'm looking at the underlying numbers a little bit just to see if like his chances are down at all. Pretty well similar. I guess he's averaging like 1 chance per game less. How
about on the defensive end?
Higher. So shots blocked is pretty much the same. A percentage of 1. He actually is hitting more than he was a year ago. He has more takeaways per 60 than he had a year ago. Is averaging more giveaways than he had a season ago. In terms of on ice, we look at goals, expected goals. Let's see this. Expected goals against is 269 a year ago, 289 per 60 this season. Funny enough, though, on the ice for more expected goals per 60 and is a expected goal differential of 51%. Last year was 48%. So analytically, better things are happening this year when he's out there than they were a season ago. More scoring chances for his team when he's out there this season. More high danger chances for his team when he's out there this season. Ultimately, I mean, it just doesn't seem to be going.
It's not going in on him right now. So if you're going to betonline.net, you're betting on an OV heater coming up. You think he's going to get that point total up?
I think so. His PDO's at 957, so that's a little low for what you would expect. For Alex Ovechkin. So I think that the numbers suggest that he's been a little bit better, and arguably when he's on the ice, better things are happening for his team this season than they were a season ago. Like last year when he was on the ice, they're averaging 3.46 goals per 60. This year it's down to just 1.68, but the expectation is 2.86. So they're performing below expectation, which is probably skewing what we're thinking of Alex Ovechkin. So I might throw a flag on the play there, Ross. I think I'm going to throw a flag on the play. I don't think he can be included.
Fair. That's fair. I just had to look at a team that was disappointing me and then looked at their top players, and those aren't the numbers I come to expect from Alex Ovechkin, but good rebuttal. I appreciate it. And now let's get to our MVP as we're now 20 games into the NHL season. Mikey, who do you have?
Well, so the MVP, this one might somewhat shock and surprise. I want to hear yours first, actually. I would like to hear yours first, and then I'll drop mine because I think it might surprise you, but you'll also be happy to hear it. But go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, I would tell you that 2, if not 3, would all be from the Western Conference if the voting was today.
The top 2, I would say Robertson and McDavid, probably 1 and 2 in that order. I might add Robertson up at the top at this point, but that's for the Western Conference people to talk about.
That's actually they had a great debate on Locked On Fantasy Hockey today. You can go check that out wherever you get your podcasts on. Who would you rather?
On Overdrive yesterday, where we talked about league MVP to this point in the season, they went McDavid, and I was on an island on Jason Robertson, but I think I brought a pretty good case. I mean, you go look at the production per 60 numbers, the guy's absolutely on fire, and he leads the NHL in goals. Like, and you know what's crazy about it? So he's on pace for an 82-game season to score 67 goals this year. You would think that, and this is coming off a year where he scored 41, you would think that that would mean what? The shooting percentage is probably out of whack, right?
Right.
Incorrect. Exact same shooting percentage,
Wow.
18%, which could suggest that we might get another, potentially 60 goal scorer, and probably 50 at least out of Jason Robertson this year, which is insane to think about. But
Interesting.
This is an Eastern Conference show.
Yep.
We got to chat about an Eastern Conference player. So who's that guy for you?
Oh, there's some great ones. I almost want to go with my preseason pick, and I'm gonna do it. I have to. It's got to be David Pastrnak. You laughed me out of the room when I put him up there, and now he's 5th in league scoring, 2nd among Eastern Conference players, and I would argue for sure he's having a better year than Nikita Kucherov, who's 2 points up on him. You can make the argument, and I think I know where you're gonna go, although I'm excited to find out. But Pasternak's just been unbelievable. 17 points at even strength, 15 more on the power play, and that's where Boston's been making their hay. He's already got 106 shots on goal, 2nd in the National Hockey League behind Timo Meier. Somehow Timo Meier's 119 shots, by the way, which is 13 more than anyone else. And only Austin Matthews, Nathan McKinnon, and Tage Thompson and Jack Hughes have over 100. So he's putting everything at net like we know he does. 14 goals, as I said, 32 points, averaging 1.5 per game. I just think that he brings it every night. And if he wasn't playing as well as he is Boston 1st or 2nd, I should say, behind New Jersey? They're going kind of neck and neck. I don't know. So, yeah, I got to stick with David Pastrnak, but a lot of good candidates.
All right. That's not the guy who I would have at the top of my list. And the guy who I have at the top of my list, and the reason why I said I think you'll appreciate it, and I don't know how legitimate this is because goaltenders don't typically end up getting the MVP, but go look at what Ilya Sorokin is doing out on the island, man. Like, this team is horrible defensively. Last I checked, they were legitimately bottom 3 in almost every defensive category there is in terms of scoring chances against, shot attempts for, goals. Like, it's just disgusting what the type of defense that they're playing in front of this guy. Yet you go look at them, and they're one of the best teams, and they just keep winning games. Why is that? Because Ilya Sorokin has been an absolute phenom. He's got a .933 save percentage, a .219 goals against. The guy's saved 14 goals, saved above average. His goals saved above expected.
Is that first?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, first. Yes, first. It's definitely first. Him and Linus Ullmark are kind of neck and neck in that regard. And then
Hellbuck's got to be up there too.
He is up there for sure for Winnipeg. But you look at goalie point share, which is almost like baseball's equivalent of WAR, the point share statistic that Hockey Reference has. He's number 1 in the NHL with 4.1 point shares. So that's 4 points, which is more than any other goaltender in the National Hockey League that he has accrued for his team based on his play alone. I honestly am still confused at how they calculate that stat, to be honest with you. But it's got to be more than that, man. Like, he's won them so many. He's won them, specifically his play. That game last week against the Edmonton Oilers where they won 3-0, the dude made 50 saves. 50 saves. The expected goals was like 6.3 expected goals for Edmonton.
Yeah.
Scored 0 because of Ilya Sorokin's play. The Leafs, they should have won that game last week against New York as well. Ilya Sorokin played spoiler. So that's 4 points just with those 2 games alone. And this guy's been one of the best in the league. So to me, Ilya Sorokin, I know it's tough for goalies to get MVP love because they don't play every night. And we saw this kind of happen with Ilya Shesterkin last year. But honestly, this is a player who, in my mind, should get some love. And to this point, I'm going to put a little staple on him and say that's my guy. That's my Eastern Conference MVP through the quarter mark of the season.
Yeah, that's great. And I know it doesn't count for this year, but I saw him play in Winnipeg last year, shutout, 35 saves in that game. Like, he's unreal. And he plays so much smaller than he looks. Like, he's listed at 6'3", but he has this really low stance. But man, he kicks out saves, no rebounds. It's super impressive to watch. So I like that from you. Anyone who's listening or watching, you can go comment on YouTube, leave us a 5-star review. Who are your MVP, cup pick, most surprising player, and most disappointing? I have a feeling there's going to get some conversation going. So go do that on the YouTube channel and on the Locked On NHL podcast. Mikey, I just picked up a vintage jersey. I know you're a card guy. Are you much of a jersey guy too?
Little bit. Did you like those Red Wings jerseys last night that they had? That
They look better on the ice than in pictures. I'll give them that.
So my co-host of the lunch didn't like them, Julia Teixeira, but I actually really liked them, and they reminded me of like a Coke Zero. I called them the Coke Zero jerseys, and I thought they were pretty sharp.
Yeah, you know what I like? And again, this is going to lead into the jersey I'm going to pull up, but the Winnipeg Jets reverse retro, that baby blue looks sharp on the ice. They've been wearing them more and more, and that logo is on this one too. How do you like this guy? The old school. Oh yeah, dude. You already know where I went with it, right? With the captain. You got a guess?
What, captain? What, Howard Chuck?
No.
Oh, come on.
Old Keith Tkachuk, buddy. It's a nice little mix there. Big Walt. Actually, it was a 2-for-1 deal. Sick for vintage jerseys. I got the blue one with Teemu Selanne, number 13, obviously with the glove throw, the little how are you. But yeah, went with Keith, youngest captain in Jets history. And now his son's the captain of the team I cover every day. So I'm going to throw that on. I got Avalanche Jets tonight. Mikey will do this again next week. It'll be December. We'll get in maybe we'll probably wait 2 weeks for that, but we got to get some stocking stuffers, what we would give certain players in the NHL. That could be a fun topic here in December on the Locked On NHL podcast. For more, tomorrow we've got power rankings, and every Friday, Rachel Donner and Gil Martin will take you through the week that was in the National Hockey League. But for today, we say goodbye. For Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan, and this has been the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day.